frost pierced her bones like 1,000 sharp needles. Martha Collins lay under the vast concrete arch of the Manhattan Bridge, curled into a fetal position, wrapped in a blanket salvaged from a dumpster that reeked of urine and damp. December in New York knew no mercy. The temperature had plummeted to 5 degrees, and the icy wind, whipping off the East River, cut through every crack between the bridge's massive pillars. Above her head, cars rumbled like thunder. Hundreds of people were rushing to warm homes, to families, to holiday preparations. No one knew that just a few meters beneath their feet, a young woman was dying. A woman who, just a year ago, had played Vivaldi at the Boston Symphony Hall, wearing an elegant black gown and her grandmother's pearls. Now, those pearls were long sold for a bowl of soup. Now, Martha wore 3 layers of torn sweaters found in clothing donation bins, dirty ski pants with a hole in the knee, and disintegrating winter boots with no soles. Her long chestnut hair, once glossy and manicured, now hung in greasy strands around a gaunt face. Her cheeks had sunken in. Her eyes had lost their shine. They were just 2 dark pits filled with despair. On her right hand remained a wedding ring. She couldn't take it off. Her finger had swollen from frostbite. That ring was like a noose tightening around her throat, a reminder of the curse she had brought upon herself by saying "I do" to Christopher "Chris" Newman. She shivered incessantly. The pneumonia, which had started a week ago as an innocent cough, was now a fire consuming her chest. Every breath was a battle. Her throat burned, and her lungs rattled as if someone were crushing wet paper inside them. The fever blurred the line between reality and dreams. She saw her children, Jacob, Michael, and Sophie, reaching out their little hands to her, crying, calling out, "Mama, Mama." Their faces were indistinct, blurry, because she had only seen them for 3 days after giving birth before Chris took them away. Only 3 days, and 5 months had passed. 5 months of hell. She remembered that morning in the hospital. She woke up in an empty recovery room, groggy from sedatives that, as she later realized, Chris had been feeding her during the last weeks of pregnancy, hiding them in her vitamin pills. The bassinets were empty. There were no nurses. On the bedside table lay a white envelope. Opening it with trembling hands, she felt the ground drop out from under her. The letter was short, written in impersonal legal language. Based on the court order dated November 12, 2023, the patient Martha Collins has been deemed unfit to care for minor children due to severe mental disorders, paranoid schizophrenia. Full parental authority is transferred to the father, Christopher Newman. The patient is forbidden from contacting the children until the completion of psychiatric treatment. Any attempt to approach the minors will result in immediate involuntary hospitalization. Martha screamed so loudly that nurses came running. She tried to run down the hallway to find the neonatal unit, but 2 women held her back by force. The on-call doctor, an older man with cold eyes, looked at her like an animal. "Miss Collins, please calm down. The children are in a safe place. Your husband took them home. Your condition requires observation." That was when she slapped him. She remembered the taste of blood in her mouth as security tackled her to the floor. She remembered the prick in her arm. Another injection. Darkness. She woke up strapped to a hospital bed. For the next 4 days, she was held in the psychiatric ward. She screamed that it was a mistake, that she was healthy, that her husband had conspired against her. No one listened. The psychiatrist, a short, balding man, introducing himself as Dr. Andrew Rogers, came twice a day, asked questions and took notes. "Martha, why do you believe your husband wants to harm you? Is it true you had suicidal thoughts during pregnancy? Do you hear voices?" His tone was soft, compassionate, but ice danced in his eyes. Now, 6 months later, lying under the bridge, Martha understood. Rogers was Chris's buddy. Everything had been rigged. They released her after a week. Without money, without ID. Chris had lost her passport and license. Without a phone. She returned to the home she shared with her husband, an apartment in Manhattan's Upper East Side, a 2-bedroom place she had bought with her artistic grants. The doors were locked. The locks changed. In the hallway, her neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, whispered with pity, "Oh, honey, you don't live here anymore. Your husband sold the apartment 2 weeks ago. He said you were sick. That money was needed for treatment." Sold. Her apartment. Without her knowledge. Martha leaned against the wall, feeling her legs give way. Mrs. Higgins pressed a $100 bill into her hand. "It's all I can do. Go to your family." But Martha had no family. Her mother died when she was 16. Cancer ate her in 8 months. Her father, an alcoholic, vanished a week after the funeral, leaving the teenager alone. Extended family. Aunt Mary, the one who left her a plot of land in Vermont, died a year before the wedding. There was no one. Friends? Chris had systematically cut her off from everyone during 2 years of marriage. Former colleagues from the conservatory didn't answer their phones. Chris had probably sent them the same lies he told her employers. Martha is sick. Martha is dangerous. Martha needs treatment. She tried to fight. With that $100 from Mrs. Higgins, she went to a law firm, a small, dingy office in Queens, the only one that agreed to a free initial consultation. The lawyer, a young man with bored eyes, looked through the documents she had obtained from the court clerk. "Ms. Collins, you have been officially incapacitated. Your husband presented opinions from 2 psychiatrists, treatment records, and testimony of your behavior in the hospital. Even if you claim it's a forgery, a lawsuit to overturn incapacitation takes at least a year and costs, well, let's say $10,000. Do you have $10,000? She looked at him through tears. He shrugged. "Unfortunately, I can't help you pro bono. I'm sorry." She went to the police. The officer listened with a stone face. "You claim your husband kidnapped the children?" "Yes. He took them without my consent." The cop looked at the computer screen. "According to court files, you have been stripped of parental rights. The husband has full custody. This isn't kidnapping. It's the execution of a judgment. If you approach the children, you will be arrested for violating a restraining order." Martha screamed then. "But I am their mother. I gave birth to them." The officer stood up, ending the conversation. "According to the law, you are a mentally ill person. Come back when you get documents proving your recovery." Months passed like a nightmare in slow motion. The $100 lasted a week in a cheap hostel in the Bronx, where 8 women slept in one room, and the night was filled with crying, cursing, and snoring. Then the money ran out. She tried to find work, but without ID, without an address, without references, no one wanted to hire her. Even cleaning toilets in a mall required paperwork. One day she called the Boston Symphony, where she played before the wedding. The director, Mr. Edwards, had always valued her. He picked up, but his voice was cold. "Martha, we received a letter from your husband. You know we cannot employ people with issues. It's a legal liability. I'm sorry." He hung up. Chris had taken care of everything. That was when she first thought about death. She stood on the Brooklyn Bridge walkway, looking down at the black waters of the East River. It would be enough to jump over the railing. A second of flight, then silence. End of pain. No one would look for her. No one would cry. But as she placed her hand on the cold metal, she heard a voice in her head. Not a hallucination, not madness, just an echo of memory. A newborn's cry. Jacob cried the loudest, Michael the quietest, and Sophie. Sophie had a special drawn-out cry, like singing. 3 days. She had only heard those voices live for 3 days, but it was enough for maternal love to hook into her heart. She stepped back from the railing. She couldn't die. Not now. Not until she saw them at least once, even from afar. For the next few weeks, she sat outside Chris's house, a massive white mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, which he bought with the money from her Vermont land. She learned this later. She took the bus there, stood behind a tree across the street, staring at the windows. Sometimes she saw Chris, handsome, elegant, getting into a silver BMW. Once, she saw a stroller, a quad stroller, pushed by a nanny. Martha's heart beat so hard she nearly fainted. Running across the street, she screamed, "My children! Those are my children!" The nanny, a young woman, looked at her in terror and began to run, pushing the stroller up the driveway. Martha ran after her, but her legs, weakened by hunger, refused to obey. She fell onto the pavement, cutting her knee on the curb. Blood ran down her leg, but she felt no pain. She only felt emptiness. Then the police arrived. Someone had called a patrol. 2 officers, young, hiding their contempt poorly. "Miss Collins, please come with us. We received a report that you are violating the restraining order." They locked her up for a night in a holding cell. In the morning, a prosecutor came, an older man who spoke to her like she was an idiot. "Do you understand that next time you will land in a closed psychiatric ward? For months? Leave these children alone. They have a father. They don't need—" He stopped, seeing the tears streaming down her face. He didn't finish the sentence. They released her with a warning. Since then, Martha avoided Greenwich, but she couldn't stop thinking. At night, sleeping in parks, in doorways, in shelters, she saw the triplets. How they grew, how they learned to walk, how they said their first word. And that word certainly wasn't Mama. Chris would ensure they forgot her. Maybe he had already told them, "Your mother was sick. Your mother didn't love you. Your mother left." Lies, like everything about that man. Now, under the bridge, on a December night, Martha felt she wouldn't survive until morning. Her hands and feet had stopped hurting. A bad sign, she knew. Advanced frostbite causes loss of sensation. The fever raged. Her temperature probably reached 104. She saw strange things. Angels emerging from the bridge pillars. Her mother's face smiling from the sky. Little feet running toward her. Her dead mother spoke to her. "Come, daughter. It is warm here. There is no pain here." Martha reached out, wanting to touch the vision. But instead of an angel, she touched cold. Concrete. She coughed. Blood spilled from her lips. The pneumonia had turned into something worse. She knew this was the end. She whispered, moving her chapped and cracked lips with difficulty, "God, if you hear me, please, just one time, let me see them, just once, and then you can take me." The prayer was so quiet that even the drunk sleeping 30 feet away didn't hear it. No one heard. Only God, if he existed. She closed her eyes. She heard the rumble of the subway train. Over the bridge. Warmth spread through her body. False warmth, the final gift from an organism that had stopped fighting before death. Content, ready, she began to drift off. It's a good way, she thought, to fall asleep, not to wake up, without pain, without shame, without... In the distance, a sound rang out, screeching brakes. A car stopped near the underpass. A door opened. Footsteps. A male voice concerned. "Oh God, there's someone here." Darkness consumed Martha before she could open her eyes. Thomas "Tom" Winter was returning that evening from a business meeting in downtown Manhattan. The meeting had been a nightmare. The client, a wealthy developer, wanted Tom to help him illegally seize a plot of land belonging to an elderly woman who refused to sell. "Find a way, Tom. You always find a way." Tom had refused. The client exploded. "You were supposed to be the best, but you're just another idealist." Tom left the restaurant feeling empty. He was 52 years old, had 25 years of legal practice, a villa in Greenwich, money, respect, but he had no one waiting for him at home. His wife Anne and daughter Zoe had died 5 years ago. A drunk truck driver slammed into their car on the highway. Instant death, the paramedics said. No suffering. But Tom suffered. Every day. He drove his black Mercedes along the East River, heading toward the highway to Connecticut. There was a red light near the bridge underpass. He stopped, staring blankly at the dark. Water of the river. Then he saw something near the bridge pillar. Movement. A shape. Something lying there. At first, he thought it was a drunk. New York was full of homeless people, especially in winter. He usually drove past indifferently. But that night, maybe because he was particularly lonely, maybe because the client had called him an idealist, with disdain, something made him pull over. He got out of the car, leaving the engine running and the hazard lights on. The cold hit him in the face, like a slap. He approached the figure under the bridge. It was a woman, young, thin as a skeleton, in rags. Her face was blue, her breathing very shallow. Tom knelt beside her, pulling off his gloves to check her pulse. It was weak, barely palpable. Fever. His hand felt it immediately through the layers of clothes. This woman was dying. In an hour, maybe 2, she would be a corpse. Something in her face moved his heart. She wasn't a drunk. There was no smell of alcohol. She was someone who once had another life. He saw the wedding ring on her swollen hand. She was married. Where was her husband? Why was she lying here alone? Tom took out his phone and dialed 911. Paramedics, this is Tom Winter. I'm at the Manhattan Bridge underpass, Brooklyn side. I have a woman in critical condition, suspected hypothermia and severe infection. Send an ambulance immediately. The dispatcher asked for details, but Tom interrupted. There's no time. Send them. I take responsibility. He hung up. Then he took off his cashmere coat, a gift from his wife, the last one he got before her death, and covered the woman with it. He knew the paramedics might arrive in 10 minutes or 30, and in this frost, every minute was a death sentence. He picked her up. She weighed maybe 90 pounds, bones draped in skin. He carried her to the Mercedes and laid her on the back seat, wrapping her additionally in an emergency blanket from the trunk. He turned the heat to the maximum. The woman moaned, quietly, moving her head. Tom saw her eyes. They opened for a second, dark, full of pain. She whispered something, unintelligible words. He strained his hearing. Jacob, Michael, Sophie. Names, 3 names. Her children. Tom felt a cold shiver down his spine. This woman has children, and she is lying under a bridge. The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. The paramedics jumped out, ready to take the woman, but Tom said firmly, You are taking her to my clinic, the private medical center, on the Upper East Side. Dr. Evans is waiting. The young paramedic looked uncertain. Sir, she should go to a public hospital. We can't. Tom took out his wallet and showed a card. My name is Thomas Winter. I am an attorney, and I have a contract with that clinic. This woman is my client. Please drive where I say, or I will personally report this to your supervisor for obstructing aid. It was a lie. He had no connection to her, but his tone left no room for discussion. The paramedics loaded Martha onto the stretcher. At the clinic, Dr. Evans, an internist with whom Tom collaborated on several medical cases, was on duty. An old friend, called at midnight, asked no questions. He examined the woman. Advanced pneumonia, dehydration, probable sepsis, 2nd-degree frostbite on hands and feet. Tom, another few hours and she would have been dead. Tom nodded. Save her, whatever it costs. Evans frowned. Who is she? Tom didn't know how to answer. I don't know, but I found her, and I don't leave people behind. For 3 days, Martha was unconscious. She lay in the intensive care unit, hooked up to IVs, in an oxygen mask. Tom came every day, sitting by her bed for an hour after work. He looked at her face, now washed, cared for, though still emaciated. She was younger than he thought, maybe 28, 30 years old. Her long hair had been washed and braided. The ring was still on her finger. They couldn't remove it without risking damage to the finger. Tom wondered who she was. What happened that she ended up on the street? Where was her family? Husband? Children? Jacob? Michael? Sophie? On the 3rd day, early in the morning, a nurse called. Mr. Winter, she's waken up. Tom arrived in 30 minutes, cancelling a court appearance. His associate covered for him. He entered the room. Martha lay with open eyes staring at the ceiling. She was breathing evenly, but there was confusion in her eyes. Seeing him, she flinched, pulling her head back into the pillow like a frightened animal. Tom stopped in the doorway, raising his hands in a calming gesture. Please, don't be afraid. My name is Thomas Winter. I found you under the bridge. I brought you here. You are safe. His voice was calm, deep, without threat. Martha looked at him with wide eyes. For a long moment she was silent. Then, with difficulty, she whispered in a raspy voice, Where am I? Tom stepped closer, sitting on the chair by the bed, keeping his distance. In a private clinic in Manhattan. You were very sick. Pneumonia, frostbite. The doctors saved you. Martha looked at her hands, wrapped in bandages, then at the IV in her arm. Tears filled her eyes. Why did you save me? Tom didn't know how to answer that question. Why? Because he couldn't do otherwise. Because she reminded him of his daughter, helpless, needing protection. Because he stopped at the red light at the right moment. He said, because God wanted it so. Martha closed her eyes. Tears flowed down her cheeks. She whispered, That means he still needs me. Tom didn't understand, but he didn't interrupt. After a moment, Martha opened her eyes, looked him straight in the face, and asked with desperation, Are you a real doctor? Will you lock me in a psychiatric hospital? The question was so unexpected that Tom flinched. I am not a doctor. I am a lawyer, and no one will lock you anywhere if you don't want to be there. The word lawyer acted like a key. Martha suddenly sat up in bed, ignoring the pain, ignoring the dizziness. She grabbed Tom by the sleeve of his jacket with such force that she almost pulled him over. Lawyer? A lawyer? You are an attorney? Tom nodded, slightly alarmed by her reaction. Martha began to speak quickly, chaotically, like someone afraid they will be silenced forever. Please help me. Please listen to me. Everyone says I'm crazy, but I'm not. I swear to God, I'm not. My husband took my children. Triplets, Jacob, Michael, and Sophie. I gave birth to them 5 months ago, and he forged documents, bribed a psychiatrist, stole my assets, and... Her voice broke, and she began to cough violently. Tom handed her a glass of water, but she pushed it away. Please believe me. Just this once. Just one person. Please. Tom looked at her, analyzing. His professional experience had taught him to recognize truth, and this woman was either telling the truth or was the best actress he had ever seen. She didn't look crazy. She looked broken, terrifyingly abandoned, but her eyes were clear, lucid. There was no psychotic confusion in them. There was pain. Huge, overwhelming pain. Tom took a notebook and pen from his pocket. A lawyer's habit. He sat back comfortably, looked her in the eyes, and said the sentence that changed both their lives. Please, tell me everything from the beginning. I will listen as long as you speak. And I promise, I will believe you until I find proof that you are lying. But, looking at you now, you don't look like a liar. Martha burst into tears. She cried for 5 minutes, unable to utter a word, like a child who had been brave for too long. Tom waited patiently, handing her tissues. When she finally calmed down, she began to speak. She told him about her childhood, an orphan who survived thanks to music, about the conservatory, the scholarships, the dreams, then about meeting Chris, how he seemed perfect, how he loved her, so she thought, how quickly they got married, about Aunt Mary and her land, about how everything changed after the wedding, how Chris became cold, distant, about the pregnancy, how he tried to force her to have an abortion, saying triplets were an economic burden, about the pills he gave her right before birth, about the 3 days of happiness in the hospital holding her children, and then waking up in an empty room, the letter, the psychiatrist, the court hearing that never happened, because how could there be a hearing without her presence, about how she tried to fight, how no one wanted to listen, about the months on the street, about the night under the bridge when she prayed for death. Tom took notes throughout the story. He didn't interrupt once. When she finished, it was evening. The story had taken 4 hours. Martha was exhausted, pale, but a shadow of hope appeared in her eyes. She waited for his reaction. Tom put down the notebook, interlaced his fingers, and looked her straight in the eye. He spoke slowly, clearly so every word would land. "Martha, I believe you. This is not psychosis. This is organized crime. Embezzlement, document forgery, false imprisonment, deprivation of parental rights based on false evidence. Your husband is a criminal, and I intend to prove it in court." Martha looked at him like a vision from another world. You believe me?" Tom nodded. "Yes, and I don't just believe. I will help you. From today, I am your lawyer. Pro bono, no fees. We will get your children back, your property, and your dignity. And your husband will go where he belongs, behind bars." Martha sank back onto the pillows, covering her face with her hands. She cried quietly, but these tears were different. Not of despair, but of relief. For the first time in 5 months, someone believed her. Someone with power, with knowledge, with strength. When she calmed down, Tom added, "But you must know, this will be a long fight. Your husband has money. He has connections. He will fight dirty. Things will come out that will be painful. You must be strong. Can you handle it?" Martha looked at him, straightening up. "Mr. Winter, I survived 5 months of hell. Now I am ready for another 5 years if it means I see my children. Yes, I can handle it." Tom smiled for the first time, slightly but sincerely. "Good, because you just got the best lawyer in New York." For the next 2 weeks, Martha stayed at the clinic, officially for recovery. Tom arranged everything: a room, food, clothes. He asked one of the nurses to buy basic things for Martha: 2 dresses, a skirt, blouses, underwear, a winter coat. When Martha saw the new clothes laid out on the chair, she cried again. She didn't remember the last time someone gave her something new, clean, pretty. Tom came daily, spending hours with her preparing the case. He recorded her testimony on a dictaphone, asked for every detail: dates, places, names. Martha pulled everything from her memory: the name of the psychiatrist, Dr. Andrew Rogers, the address of the old notary office where Chris forced her to sign papers, the name of the neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, who saw the apartment sale. Tom wrote it all down. One day, he brought her a notebook and pen. "Please write down everything you remember, every detail, even if it seems unimportant. This will be our source, and I will start gathering official evidence." Martha started writing. She wrote in the evenings when the clinic went quiet, filling the pages with her small, neat teacher's handwriting. She wrote about how Chris suddenly became affectionate in the last weeks of pregnancy, bringing her vitamins in pink capsules, insisting she take them regularly. Now she understood. They were sedatives, probably benzodiazepines, causing confusion and drowsiness. He was preparing the ground for the psychiatric diagnosis. Tom hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, Robert Kay, who specialized in economic crimes. Kay asked the key question: did this Christopher Newman leave any traces, transfers, documents, witnesses? Tom showed him Martha's notes. Kay nodded. The guy's arrogant. That's good. Arrogant ones always make mistakes. I'll give you something in 2 weeks. Martha felt her strength returning, not just physical, but mental. Food, warmth, safety, but above all, hope. Tom also invited another person, Professor Hannah Lewis, a forensic psychiatrist. The professor, a woman in her 60s with short grey hair and piercing eyes, came to the clinic. One Thursday morning, she talked with Martha for 3 hours, asking questions, asking to describe emotions, testing memory, logic, reactions. In the end, she drafted an opinion. The patient shows no symptoms of schizophrenia, psychotic disorders, or other serious mental illnesses. She is an intelligent, conscious person with preserved logical thinking. Her story is coherent, detailed, and devoid of elements characteristic of delusions. In my opinion, the diagnosis made by Dr. Rogers is an evident error or a deliberate forgery. Tom showed this opinion to Martha. She read it slowly, as if not believing her own eyes. Then she looked at Tom, tears shining in her eyes. So, I'm really not crazy. You believe it too? Tom placed a hand on her shoulder, a fatherly, warm gesture. You were never crazy, Martha. You were just deceived by someone you trusted. After 2 weeks, Martha left the clinic. Tom proposed something that surprised her. Do you have a place to live? Martha shook her head. Tom said without hesitation, you will live with me. I have a large villa in Greenwich. There is a guest room. You will stay until we get your life back. Martha protested. Mr. Winter, I can't. That's too much. You've already done so much for me. Tom interrupted gently. Martha, I live alone in a house with 10 rooms. My wife and daughter are dead. This house is too big for one man. Please treat it as an exchange. You get a roof over your head, I get company, and it will be easier for me to handle the case. We will be in constant contact. Martha agreed, feeling immense gratitude and simultaneously a slight unease. Was this right? Would it cross a line? But Tom looked genuinely interested in helping, not like someone who wanted something in return. His eyes were sad, but clean. Tom's villa turned out to be beautiful, an old estate renovated with taste, surrounded by a garden, with floors smelling of wax and a fireplace in the living room. Martha's room was spacious, with a large window overlooking the forest. The bed was soft. The bedding smelled of lavender. That evening, Martha took a long, hot shower, the first in months. She stood under the stream of water, watching the dirt wash off her body, thinking, this isn't a dream. This is really happening. After the shower, she went down for dinner. Tom had prepared something simple, pasta with tomato sauce, salad, tea. They ate in silence, but it wasn't awkward. Martha felt safe. Tom didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't look at her like a case or a victim. He looked at her like a human being. Life in the villa stabilized in a strange, unexpected way. Martha helped around the house. She cooked, cleaned, though Tom had a housekeeper who came 3 times a week. Tom protested, "You don't have to." But Martha insisted, I must feel useful. Otherwise, I'll go crazy waiting." So Tom allowed it. In the evenings, they sat in the living room. Tom read files, Martha wrote in her notebook, or just sat by the fireplace, watching the fire. Sometimes they talked. Tom told her about his wife, his daughter, the accident. Martha listened, holding his hand. Then she told him about her mother, about music, about dreams. In the third week, Tom brought her a violin. He found it in a pawn shop in Brooklyn. "It's not your old one, but I thought maybe you'd like to play." Martha took the instrument with trembling hands. She touched the strings. For a few days she couldn't. Her fingers were still stiff from frostbite. But one evening, when Tom went to the office, Martha began to play. The melody was sad, full of pain, but beautiful. When Tom returned, he found her playing by the window, tears on her face. He listened in the doorway, not interrupting. It was a piece she had composed under the bridge, in the darkest night. A prayer that was answered. And then fate delivered the first blow. A month after the rescue, when Martha began to return to life, when Tom was gathering evidence, when it seemed they had a chance, Christopher Newman found out that Martha was alive. It happened by accident, or perhaps through carelessness. The detective, Robert Kay, while tailing Chris, was spotted. Chris, a man experienced in dirty business, also employed private detectives. One of them, an ex-cop, recognized Kay. The surveillance was detected. Chris ordered his people to reverse the surveillance. They started following Kay, and he, unaware, led them straight to Tom Winter's villa in Greenwich. Chris got the report. "Your wife is alive. She's living with attorney Thomas Winter. Winter is a heavy hitter, the best family lawyer in New York, known for fraud cases. If he's taken her on, then..." Chris didn't need to read the rest. He understood everything. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office in the Greenwich mansion, drinking whiskey and analyzing the situation. If Martha had the support of such a lawyer, the case could turn. Tom Winter had a reputation. He had won 90% of his cases in the last 10 years. If he started digging, he would find the fake signatures, the bribed notary, Dr. Rogers. Everything would crumble. Chris called his mother, Elizabeth. They met the next day in her apartment on Park Avenue. Elizabeth, an elegant woman with cold eyes, listened to her son. "So that rag is alive? I thought she froze under the bridge." Chris shook his head. "Some hero found her. Now she has a defender. We have to act before she files a lawsuit." Elizabeth lit a cigarette, thinking. Then she said, "We have two options. Either we destroy her once and for all, more than before, or we destroy the lawyer. Check if he has any dirt. Everyone does." Chris nodded. The next day, his people started digging into Thomas Winter's past. But Tom was clean. An impeccable reputation. No affairs, no scandals. The only point that could be exploited was his tragedy, the death of his family. Elizabeth came up with a plan. "Let's file a report with the district attorney. We'll write that Winter is exploiting Martha, that it's not legal aid, but manipulation, that he kept her at his place for immoral purposes, that it's a violation of professional ethics." Chris hesitated. "But she lives there voluntarily." Elizabeth smiled coldly. "And who will check that?" The prosecutor sees a young woman, declared mentally unstable, living with an older, wealthy man. Looks bad, doesn't it? And even if they prove nothing, will cast a shadow of suspicion. They'll start investigating Tom. He'll withdraw from the case to protect his reputation. And Martha will be alone. 3 days later, Tom received a summons from the district attorney's office. Accusation: exploitation of the trust of a person incapable of making independent decisions. Violation of professional ethics. Suspicion of holding a person against their will. Tom read the letter, feeling a cold rage. This was Chris's work. Obvious, clumsy, but effective. Now he would have to defend himself. That evening he told Martha. She was sitting in the living room, playing the violin quietly. Tom entered holding the letter. His face was tense. Martha stopped playing. Did something happen? Tom sat down heavily. Your husband attacked. A report to the DA. He claims that I'm exploiting you, that you are living here not of your own free will. Martha paled. How can he? Tom raised a hand. It's a lie, of course, but the truth doesn't matter. Yet, I'll have to defend myself, and that means your case might be delayed. Martha stood up abruptly, walking over to him. No, you can't give up. I will testify that it's not true. I'll tell the prosecutor. Tom shook his head. It's not that simple. You are officially incapable of making decisions. Your testimony can be questioned. Chris knows that. He's playing for time. Silence fell. Martha felt the hope that had been growing in her heart for the last month begin to crack. Everything would crumble. Chris would win again. She sat on the floor, resting her head on her knees. She whispered, I'm sorry. It's because of me. You lost your peace, your reputation, everything because of me. Tom knelt beside her, lifting her chin so she looked him in the eyes. Martha, listen to me. Chris is trying to scare us, but we won't give up. I'm not giving up. And neither are you, right? Martha looked at him through tears. In his eyes, she saw determination, strength, but also something else, something she hadn't seen in years, a fervent desire to fight for justice. She nodded. Right. Tom stood up, extending a hand to her. So we move forward. Chris doesn't know who he started a war with, but 2 days later came another blow, even more brutal. Martha was alone in the house. Tom had gone to a hearing in Boston. Around noon, the doorbell rang. Martha, thinking it was the mailman, opened it. On the threshold stood a man in a suit, young, with sleek hair and a fake smile. Miss Martha Collins? Martha nodded uncertainly. The man showed a badge. Court services. I have questions regarding your living situation. May I come in? Martha let him in, not knowing she was making a mistake. The man looked around the house taking notes. So you live with Mr. Winter? How long? Martha answered honestly. A month. Mr. Winter is my lawyer. He's helping me get my children back. The man nodded, writing. I understand. And do you have documents confirming your identity? Martha hesitated. No. My husband took everything. The man raised an eyebrow. So you have no ID? That complicates things. You know that residing in someone else's home without documents can be classified as... He trailed off, leaving the implication hanging. Martha felt uneasy. Is there a problem? The man put away his notebook. We'll be in touch. Goodbye. He left. Martha remained, feeling a cold fear. She called Tom. He picked up immediately. What happened? Martha explained. Tom cursed quietly. That wasn't a court officer. That was another one of Chris's men. He was checking if you were there alone. Martha, lock the doors. Don't let anyone in. I'm coming back in 3 hours. But Chris had already made his move. When Tom pulled into the villa's driveway that evening, he found 2 police cars and an ambulance in front of the house. His heart jumped to his throat. He jumped out of the car, running to the door. A police officer stopped him. Mr. Winter, please remain calm. There is a report that a person dangerous to herself and others is in your home. Tom burst inside. In the living room stood Martha, pale, terrified, surrounded by 3 officers. Next to them stood Dr. Andrew Rogers, the same psychiatrist who forged her documents. Rogers was speaking in a gentle tone. Miss Martha, please calm down. No one will hurt you, but you must come with us to the hospital, just for observation. Tom shouted. No one is going anywhere. By what right? Are you in my house? One of the officers showed a court order. We have an order for involuntary hospitalization of the patient Martha Collins. The psychiatrist states she poses a threat. Tom snatched the paper from the policeman's hands, reading feverishly. It was a real order, signed by a judge, stamped. Chris had used his connections to get it in emergency mode. Martha screamed, "I won't go! They'll lock me up! I'm not sick!" She threw herself at Tom, hugging him. Tom grabbed her shoulders, looking into her eyes. "Martha, listen. This is just a provocation. But if you resist, they will use force, and that will give them an argument. Go. I will get you out of there. I promise. I'm already calling a lawyer specializing in these cases. 24 hours. I can do it. Trust me." Martha cried, but nodded. She allowed the medic to put soft restraints on her wrists. Standard procedure. Tom watched as they led her out of his home, his safe home, back into the system that had destroyed her. When the ambulance drove away, he stood in the middle of the living room, clenching his fists. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. He heard Chris's voice, smooth, full of satisfaction. "Mr. Counselor, I heard you had a guest. How long will you defend a crazy woman? You're destroying your career. Maybe it's time to let go?" Tom replied icily, "Mr. Newman, you just made the worst mistake of your life. See you in court." And he hung up. St. John's Psychiatric Hospital in Queens was a building from the 60s, grey, gloomy, surrounded by a high wall. Martha sat on the bed in room 12, looking through the barred window at the winter garden where nothing grew, just bare trees and dirty snow. She shared the room with 3 other women, one older, who talked to herself for hours, another younger, who cried quietly under the duvet, and a third who simply lay motionless, staring at the ceiling. The corridor smelled of disinfectant mixed with old age and hopelessness. Every few hours a nurse brought pills, pink, white, yellow, and stood watching to make sure Martha swallowed them. Martha put them under her tongue, and when the nurse left, she spit them into the toilet. She couldn't let them fog her mind again. She had to stay lucid. She had been here for 18 hours. 18 hours that dragged like 18 days. When the ambulance brought her the previous evening, the doctor on duty, a young woman with a tired face, asked a few routine questions. "Do you hear voices? Do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you know where you are?" Martha answered calmly, logically, trying to maintain control. But the doctor wasn't looking at her, but at the documents provided by Dr. Rogers. Patient with a history of paranoid schizophrenia, non-compliant with treatment, aggressive. Martha tried to protest. "It's not true. It's all fake. My husband bribed that psychiatrist." The doctor nodded as if she heard this thousands of times. "Yes, Ms. Collins, I understand. But now you must rest." And she ordered the nurse to give a sedative injection. Martha felt the prick in her arm. Then, darkness. She woke up in the morning, on that cold, hard bed, in a room full of strangers. For the first few minutes, she thought it was a nightmare. That she would wake up in the warm room in Tom's villa, hear his voice from downstairs. "Martha, breakfast is ready." But no, this was reality. They locked her up again. She was a prisoner of the system that was supposed to protect her, but instead kept her in a cage. First came panic. Martha got out of bed, ran to the door, started banging with her fists. "Let me out! I shouldn't be here! Call my lawyer, Thomas Winter, call him!" An orderly, a fat man with an indifferent gaze, opened the viewing window in the door. "Miss Collins, please calm down. If you don't stop screaming, we will have to use isolation." Isolation. A small room without windows, with a soft mattress on the floor, where they lock people who pose a threat. Martha had seen such places during her previous stay. She backed away from the door. She couldn't give them a reason. She had to be calm. She had to survive until Tom got her out. But hours passed, and he didn't appear. Martha tried to ask for a phone, refused. Tried to ask for a visit, told she was not ready for external contacts. She felt fear turn into despair. What if Tom couldn't help her? What if Chris arranged something that would keep her here for weeks? Months? She had seen such cases. People held for observation who disappeared into the system for years, forgotten by everyone. In the afternoon, a psychiatrist came, an older man, Dr. Simon Cole, with a grey beard and glasses. He sat opposite Martha in a small office at the end of the hall. He looked at her carefully, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Miss Collins, I read your file, but I would like to hear your version. Please tell me what happened." His tone was different from other doctors, not gentle with practiced, compassion, but factual, interested. Martha, exhausted, hesitated. Was this another trap? But what did she have to lose? She began to tell the story, once again, slowly, in detail. About Chris, the triplets, the fake documents, about Tom. Dr. Cole listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded. "Your story is very consistent, very logical. And honestly, I don't see any symptoms of psychosis. I see a woman who has gone through trauma, but not one who is mentally ill." Martha felt tears welling up. "So, you believe me?" Cole sighed. "Believing is one thing, but my hands are tied. Your admission was based on a court order. To release you, I need either the consent of the same court or the opinion of 2 independent psychiatrists. And that takes time." Martha buried her face in her hands. "Time? How much? A week? A month?" Cole added quietly, "But I will do what I can. I will give you access to a phone. Please call your lawyer." 10 minutes later, Martha stood by the wall, phone in the hallway, shaking as she dialed Tom's cell number. He answered on the first ring. "Martha, thank God. How are you?" His voice was full of relief and tension. Martha whispered, trying not to cry, I'm okay. When will you get me out of here?" Tom replied decisively, "I'm already working. I filed a motion to overturn the order. I have a hearing the day after tomorrow. I prepared everything. Professor Lewis's opinion, your testimony, evidence that Dr. Rogers is working on Chris's orders. The judge must release you. Just hold on for 2 days. Can you?" Martha looked at the corridor. Nurses, patients, bars on the windows. 2 days, 48 hours. She whispered, "I can." Tom added, his voice softer, "Martha, I know it's hard, but they are making mistake after mistake. Every move they make against you is evidence in court that they are acting with premeditation. Chris thinks he will break you, but you are stronger. Remember, you are not alone. I am here. I am waiting for you." When they hung up, Martha leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She wasn't alone. She held on to that thought like an anchor. 2 days passed in slow motion. Martha spent time sitting in the common room, observing other patients. There was a young girl, maybe 20, who drew flowers all over the wall with crayons. There was an older man who asked the nurses every hour, "Has my wife come yet?" His wife had been dead for 10 years. There was a middle-aged woman sitting in the corner, whispering prayers, an endless rosary. Martha understood their pain, their confusion. Some of them were here rightfully. They needed help, treatment, support. But how many were like her? Locked up by mistake, by conspiracy, by systemic error. On the 3rd day morning, Dr. Cole came. "Miss Collins, your hearing is in 2 hours. Get ready." Martha took a quick shower, dressed in the same clothes she was brought in, the dress and coat bought by Tom. Looking into the small, dirty mirror in the widow bathroom, she saw her face, emaciated, pale, with circles under her eyes. She looked like a sick person. Chris planned this. He wanted her to look crazy. They took her to court in an ambulance, accompanied by 2 orderlies. When she entered the courtroom, she saw Tom standing at the defense table, dressed in an elegant navy suit, with a briefcase full of documents. When their eyes met, he smiled slightly. It was a smile full of confidence. "I'll get you out of here," that smile said. The judge, a woman in her 50s with a stern face, Judge Irene Davis, began the hearing. "We are reviewing the motion of Attorney Thomas Winter to overturn the order for involuntary hospitalization of the patient Martha Collins. Mr. Counselor, please present your arguments." Tom stood up, opening his briefcase. He spoke calmly, factually, but steel determination rang in his voice. "Your Honor, patient Martha Collins was subjected to involuntary hospitalization based on a psychiatric opinion prepared by Dr. Andrew Rogers. I would like to draw the court's attention to the following facts. First, Dr. Rogers is a personal acquaintance of Christopher Newman, my client's husband. I possess bank documents indicating a transfer of $100,000 from Mr. Newman's account to Dr. Rogers' account 3 days before the issuance of the first opinion regarding my client's alleged schizophrenia." Tom placed a bank printout before the judge. The judge took it, reviewing it with a furrowed brow. Tom continued, "Second, I submit an independent opinion prepared by Professor Hannah Lewis, a forensic expert with 20 years of experience. Professor Lewis examined Miss Collins and stated unequivocally, absence of any symptoms of schizophrenia, psychosis, or other serious mental disorders. Additionally, analysis of medical records revealed numerous irregularities in Dr. Rogers' opinion, lack of standard diagnostic tests, lack of consultation with other specialists, lack of any evidence of the patient's alleged aggression." The judge looked at Martha. "Miss Collins, do you wish to say anything?" Martha stood up, trembling. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Your Honor, I am not mentally ill. I am a mother of triplets, whom my husband took from me unlawfully, using fake documents. Everything Dr. Rogers says is a lie. I beg you, please release me. Please allow me to fight for my children." Silence fell in the room. The judge looked at Martha for a long time, analyzing. Then she looked at the documents. Finally, she said, "The court decides to overturn the order for involuntary hospitalization. Patient Martha Collins is released from the psychiatric hospital with immediate effect. Simultaneously, the court commissions the district attorney's office to investigate the circumstances of the issuance of the initial psychiatric opinion by Dr. Andrew Rogers. There is reasonable suspicion of document forgery and corruption." Martha felt her legs buckling under her. Tom approached, supporting her. She whispered, "Did we win?" Tom nodded, smiling broadly. "We won. You are free." They left the court together. On the steps, journalists were waiting. The case was starting to get loud. Tom shielded Martha from the cameras, leading her to his Mercedes. When they drove away, Martha allowed herself to cry for the first time in 3 days. Tears of relief, gratitude, exhaustion. Tom drove in silence, sometimes glancing at her from the side, letting her release all the accumulated fear. When they reached the villa, Tom led her to her room. "Go take a bath, change, I'll make dinner, and then we need to talk. There is something important." In the evening, they sat in the living room by the fireplace. Martha, washed, dressed in a warm sweater and pants, felt human for the first time in days. Tom handed her tea and sat opposite. His face was serious. "Martha, I have to tell you what happened while they locked you up. Detective K found something very important." He took a file of documents from his briefcase. He spread them on the coffee table. "These are the property deeds regarding your land in Vermont. Kay dug up that Chris sold this land to a developer for $12 million 3 months ago. But there is one problem. The sale was illegal because you never transferred ownership rights to him voluntarily. The notary, Calvin Wright, admitted under Kay's pressure. He received a $50,000 bribe to forge your consent and power of attorney." Martha listened, feeling a mix of anger and shock. So, he sold my land? Aunt Mary's land? Tom nodded. Yes, but that's good for us, because the developer, BuildCorp, has paid only $5 million. The rest was to be transferred in installments. I filed a lawsuit to annul the sale contract. If we win it, and we will, the land returns to you, and Chris will have to return those $5 million, plus damages. Martha shook her head in disbelief. He really took everything. Tom looked at her with compassion. Not everything. He didn't take your will to fight, and he didn't take your children yet, because now we go on the offensive. The next day, Tom organized a meeting at his firm, a huge, spacious office on the 20th floor of a skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. Sitting at the conference table were Tom, Martha, Detective K, Professor Lewis, and a young lawyer, Tom's associate, Madeline Crawford. On the wall hung a large corkboard where Tom pinned photos, documents connected by strings, a map of the entire conspiracy. Tom stood before the board, addressing everyone. Okay, we have 5 main charges against Christopher Newman. First, forgery of medical documents. Second, corruption, bribing a psychiatrist and a notary. Third, embezzlement of Martha's assets. Fourth, deprivation of parental rights based on false evidence. Fifth, unlawful detention of children. We must prove all points. Kay, what do you have? The detective, a man in his 50s with grey hair and a sharp gaze, opened a notebook. I have a recording of a conversation between Chris and Dr. Rogers. I installed a wire in Rogers' office, legally, based on a warrant from the prosecutor's office that you obtained after the last trial. In this conversation, Chris and Rogers discuss how to get rid of Martha for good. I quote Chris, "That crazy woman won't give up. We have to lock her up longer. Can you arrange an opinion about a threat to the children?" Rogers answers, "I can, but it will cost another 50,000. Chris, I'll give you 100, but I want her not to leave the psych ward for a year. I have this recording on a drive, secured, confirmed by a forensic audio expert." The silence in the room was thick. Martha listened, feeling anger mixed with terror. This man she once loved, whom she married with hope for a happy life, planned to destroy her as methodically as demolishing a building. Professor Lewis added, "I also have an analysis of Martha's medical records. All examinations done before the wedding, and she had them done as part of periodic checkups for the Philharmonic, show she was a completely mentally healthy person. No signs of depression, schizophrenia, nothing. And suddenly, 3 weeks before birth, Dr. Rogers diagnoses schizophrenia? That is medically impossible. Schizophrenia does not appear overnight. It is a disease developing over years. His diagnosis is an obvious forgery." Madeline Crawford, the young lawyer with intelligent eyes, threw in, "I also checked the court registry. The order for Martha's incapacitation was issued in a closed session, without Martha's presence, without her lawyer, without any hearing. This is a violation of basic procedural rights. This order can be easily overturned." Tom nodded, taking notes. "Good. We have material. Now we must file several lawsuits in parallel. One to overturn the incapacitation, a second to restore Martha's parental rights, a third to annul the land sale contract, and a fourth, criminal, against Chris, Rogers, and notary right for fraud and forgery. It will be a long war, but winnable." Martha raised her hand, uncertainly. "Mr. Winter, how long will all this take? Will I see my children this year?" Tom looked at her, his eyes softening. "Martha, court cases in New York take on average a year, sometimes 2. But we have something Chris didn't foresee. We have the truth, evidence, and good press. The media has started to take interest, and judges hate cases where children are used as weapons in dirty games. We will do everything for you to see your children as soon as possible. Over the next weeks, Martha's life became a continuous process. Hearings, testimonies, consultations with lawyers. Tom introduced her to the world of court procedures, explained what civil proceedings are, what criminal are, how appeals work, what guardianship means. Martha absorbed knowledge like a sponge. She wanted to understand the system that destroyed her in Chambin's order to defeat it. In the meantime, life in the villa with Tom took on a strange, unexpected normality. Every morning Martha got up early, prepared breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, coffee. Tom came down from upstairs, dressed in a suit, ready for work. They ate together, talking about matters to handle. After breakfast, Tom drove to the firm, and Martha stayed home. She cleaned, cooked, but mostly played the violin. Music was her therapy. She composed new pieces, sad, full of longing, but also hope. One of them she named Jacob, Michael, Sophie, her children's names woven into the melody like a prayer. In the evenings, Tom returned, tired, but always found time to sit with Martha at dinner and tell her what happened. Today we questioned Notary Wright. He admitted to everything, cried like a baby, said Chris threatened him. Either he takes the bribe or loses his license another way. Or the court appointed a handwriting expert, confirmed your signature on the power of attorney is a forgery. Chris is in an increasingly worse situation. Martha listened, feeling something in her heart changing. She stopped seeing Tom only as a lawyer, savior, defender. She began to see him as a man, lonely, broken after losing his family, finding meaning in helping others. She saw his eyes soften when he looked at her. How sometimes, unconsciously, he touched her arm, as if to make sure she was real, that she wouldn't disappear. One evening, at the end of March, when the snow finally began to melt outside, they were sitting in the living room by the fireplace. Tom was reading files, and Martha was playing softly on the violin. Suddenly she stopped, putting down the instrument. Tom looked at her concerned. Did something happen? Martha shook her head, then said quietly, Mr. Winter, I wanted to ask you, why are you doing all this? For me, you spent a fortune on my defense, sacrificed your time, reputation. Why? Tom put down the documents, looking into the fire. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said, in a quiet voice full of pain, because I didn't save my family. 5 years ago, when Anne and Zoe were driving on the highway, I was calling my wife. I was arguing with her on the phone about some stupidity. I don't even remember what. I was angry, aggressive. Anne was crying. And then that drunk driver hit them. If I hadn't called, if she hadn't been distracted, maybe she would have noticed. Maybe she would have swerved. I don't know. But I know one thing. My fault or not, I live with it every day. I couldn't save them, but I can save others. I can make their death have some meaning. That I became a better man, a more empathetic lawyer. He broke off, wiping his eyes. Martha stood up, walked over to him, and placed a hand on his shoulder. Mr. Winter, it wasn't your fault. Accidents happen. But you saved me. Literally. If you hadn't found me under the bridge, I would be dead. And you didn't just save my life. You gave me back my dignity, the belief that I can win. You are a good man, the best I've ever known. Tom looked at her, tears shining in his eyes. And you are the bravest woman I've met, Martha. After everything you've been through, you're still fighting. You still believe. They looked at each other for a long time, in silence broken only by the crackle of wood in the fireplace. Something hung in the air between them, something indistinct, delicate, but real. A feeling neither dared to name. Martha stepped back, feeling her cheeks burning. I'm sorry. Good night. And she quickly left the living room. That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Tom. She couldn't fall in love with him. It would be unfair to him. He was her lawyer, guardian, and she was a broken woman with traumas, without a future. But the heart doesn't listen to reason, and Martha felt something awakening in her for the first time in years. Warmth that wasn't just gratitude. In April came the first major breakthrough. The Supreme Court in Manhattan restored Martha's legal capacity. The incapacitation was officially overturned. Tom returned home with the verdict, smiling broadly. "Martha, you are free. Legally, officially free," Martha cried, holding the judgment in her hands, reading the words. "The court finds that the grounds for incapacitation were based on false premises. Martha Collins is a fully competent person." But the next step was harder: regaining parental rights. In May, a hearing was held to restore Martha to full parental authority and strip Chris of his. The courtroom was full. Journalists, observers, guardians. Martha sat next to Tom, dressed in a modest navy dress, her hair braided. She looked scared but determined. The judge, Mr. William Stone, an old, experienced jurist, looked at both sides. "We will hear the mother first. Miss Collins, please explain why you think you should regain parental rights." Martha stood up, her voice quiet but firm. "Your Honor, I am the mother of triplets, Jacob, Michael, and Sophie. I gave birth to them, fed them for 3 days, loved them from the first second. They were taken from me not because I was a bad mother, but because my husband forged documents, bribed a doctor, and used the legal system for his own greedy purposes. Now that the truth has come out, I beg your honor, please let me be with my children. That is all I want. Just that." Then Chris testified. He entered the room confidently, dressed in an expensive suit, hair slicked back. But his confidence was a facade. Martha saw sweat on his forehead, a muscle twitching in his jaw. He sat in the witness stand, looking at the judge with a gentle smile. "Your Honor, I just wanted to protect my children. My wife, ex-wife, had serious mental problems. The doctor confirmed it. I had to act to ensure the children's safety." Tom stood up, approaching Chris. His voice was cold, sharp as a razor. "Mr. Newman, do you remember Dr. Andrew Rogers?" Chris nodded. "Yes, he is my wife's psychiatrist." Tom placed a bank printout on the table. "And do you remember a transfer of $100,000 to Dr. Rogers' account 3 days before he issued the opinion about your wife's schizophrenia?" Chris paled. That was payment for consultations." Tom interrupted. "Consultations for $100,000? While a standard psychiatric consultation costs $300. Please do not insult this court's intelligence." Tom played the recording. Chris and Roger's voices echoed in the room. "That crazy woman won't give up. We have to lock her up longer." The silence was absolute. Everyone listened as Chris planned the destruction of his own wife. When the recording ended, Chris sat pale, silent. The judge looked at him with disgust. "Mr. Newman, what we heard is not the action of a caring father. It is a conspiracy aimed at depriving a mother of access to children for financial purposes. The court rules. Martha Collins. Parental rights are fully restored. Christopher Newman is stripped of parental rights and forbidden from contacting the minors until the conclusion of criminal proceedings. The children will be handed over to the mother within 7 days." Martha heard those words and felt the world stop. 7 days. In 7 days, she would see her children. After 8 months of hell, she fell into the chair, covering her face, crying endlessly. Tom hugged her, whispering, "You won. You won, Martha." Chris left the room escorted by security, surrounded by journalists shouting questions. His face was a mask of anger and defeat. 7 days later, A warm May morning. Martha stood in front of Chris's house in Greenwich, holding Tom's hand. The court guardian, Mrs. Margaret, an older woman with a gentle gaze, opened the gate. "Miss Collins, the children are waiting. We prepared them. Explained that you are their mum. But they are small. They are now a year and 4 months old. Please be patient." Martha nodded, feeling her heart pounding like a hammer. They entered the house. In the living room, on the carpet, sat 3 children. 2 boys, Jacob and Michael, identically alike, with dark hair and big eyes, and a girl, Sophie, with blonde curls and a smile that lit up the room. Martha stood in the doorway, unable to move. She looked at them, these 3 little beings she carried in her womb, whom she birthed in pain and love, who were taken from her. Tears flowed down her face, but she couldn't utter a word. Sophie, the bravest, stood up, wobbling on her little legs. She walked over to Martha, reaching out her hands. "Mama?" The word Martha had waited to hear for 8 months. "Mama." Martha fell to her knees, taking Sophie in her arms, hugging her so tight as if afraid she would disappear. Sophie giggled, touching Martha's face. "Mama, kibuiwai?" Martha laughed through tears. "Yes, honey. Mama is crying, but these are good tears." Jacob and Michael, seeing it was safe, also approached. Martha embraced all 3, pulling them to herself, kissing their hair, faces, hands. She whispered in their ears, "I love you. I love you so much. Mama will never leave you again." Tom stood in the doorway, watching the scene, feeling his own tears welling up. It was the moment he had worked for half a year, a moment that repaired something in his broken heart. The guardian said quietly, "Miss Collins, the children are yours. You can take them home." Martha looked up at Tom. He smiled. "Let's go home." But Chris intended not to give up. A week after Martha got the children back, a new campaign began. Since he lost the children, he focused on destroying Martha in another way, through the media. He hired a PR agency that started an internet campaign. Father hero robbed by unstable wife. Sponsored articles appeared on gossip portals. Martha C., the fraudster who exploited a rich lawyer's weakness. Fake news claimed Martha was a prostitute, that the triplets weren't Chris's children, that Tom and Martha had been having an affair for a long time. Martha read these things, feeling her whole world crumbling. She sat in the villa's kitchen, holding a tablet, crying. "Mr. Winter, they are destroying me. People won't believe me. They'll think I'm a monster." Tom took the tablet from her, putting it aside. "Martha, it's just noise. People who know you know what you are like. And those who believe this nonsense don't deserve your attention. We have the truth on our side. And truth always wins." But Chris had one more ace up his sleeve. In June, a month before the main criminal trial, his mother, Elizabeth Newman, filed a lawsuit for contact with the grandchildren. She claimed that as a grandmother, she had the right to see the triplets, that Martha was alienating the children from the family. Tom flew into a rage. "This is manipulation. That woman cooperated with Chris. She helped him steal the children." Martha sat holding Sophie on her lap, feeling helpless. "What do we do?" Tom took a deep breath. "We fight. In court, we will show who this grandmother is. She won't get access, but this case required more testimonies, more hearings." Martha was exhausted. Day in and day out, she cared for the triplets, fed them, played with them, put them to sleep. But nights she spent preparing for trials. Tom helped as much as he could. He hired a nanny, Mrs. Christina, who came daily to support Martha. But it was still hard. One evening at the end of June, Martha sat in the garden watching the triplets play on the grass. She was exhausted, pale, thin. Tom came out of the house carrying 2 coffees. He sat next to her. "Martha, you need to rest. You can't wear yourself out like this. Martha shook her head. I can't rest. They are still attacking. Elizabeth, Chris, all of them. When will it end? Tom took her hand. Soon. The criminal trial is in a week. That will be the finale. Then it will all end. Martha looked at him. There was so much fatigue in her eyes. And if we lose? Tom shook his head. We won't lose. I promise you. The next day, Tom got a call from the prosecutor leading the criminal case against Chris, Dr. Rogers, and Notary Wright. The prosecutor, a young, ambitious lawyer named Michael Stone, said, Counselor, I have bad news. Notary Wright recanted his testimony. He claims he was forced by your detective to make false accusations. His new lawyer says we used psychological violence. Tom froze. What? That's impossible. Wright testified voluntarily. We have a recording. Stone sighed. His lawyer claims the recording was made under duress. And you know what? That lawyer is from a firm funded by Christopher Newman. Tom hung up, feeling cold anger. Chris bought Wright back. Probably paid him a fortune to back out. That meant one of the key witnesses disappeared. In the evening, he told Martha. She listened, feeling hope turn into despair. So, we lose. Tom shook his head. No, we still have Rogers. And we have the recording. And we have Professor Lewis's opinion. Wright is just one element. He isn't key. But both knew they had lost the advantage. Chris was fighting desperately and was ready to use any dirty method. 2 days before the trial, on a Saturday evening, Martha couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, tossing and turning. At 2 a.m, she got up, put on a robe, and went down to the kitchen to make tea. The light was on in the living room. Tom was sitting by the fireplace reviewing files. He looked up, seeing her. Can't sleep? Martha shook her head. I'm afraid something will go wrong. That Chris will win. That he'll take my children again. Tom put down the documents, standing up. He approached her, taking her face in his hands. Martha, listen to me. Chris won't win. I won't allow it. Over the last 8 months, I built a case against him that is undeniable. We have evidence. We have witnesses. We have the truth. And above all, we have you. You are the proof. Your courage, your strength, your motherhood. No judge, looking at you, will believe you are a bad mother. Martha looked at him, feeling something break in her heart. She couldn't pretend any longer. She whispered, Mr. Winter, I fell in love with you. The words came out on their own before she could stop them. Tom froze, looking at her with wide eyes. For a long moment he was silent. Then he said, his voice full of emotion, Martha, me too. I fell in love with you months ago, but I didn't want to tell you. You were my client. You were hurt. I thought it would be exploitation. Martha put a finger on his lips. It's not exploitation. It is truth. I feel it. You saved me, but now I am saving you. From loneliness, from guilt, from pain. Tom pulled her to him, kissing her gently, carefully, as if afraid she would dissolve. Martha returned the kiss, feeling safe, loved, whole for the first time in years. They stood like that for a long time, embraced, listening to the crackling fireplace, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they had each other. And that was enough. But the next day, on Sunday morning, came the last, most brutal blow. Tom went out in the morning to get bagels from a nearby bakery. He returned in 20 minutes, pale, holding a newspaper. He threw it on the table in front of Martha. On the front page of the tabloid New York Daily News, there was a huge headline, Lawyer Winter and His Mistress. A romance built on a lie? The article was full of insinuations, fake quotes from anonymous sources, photos of Tom and Martha taken surreptitiously, probably by Chris's detective. They wrote that Tom and Martha planned from the beginning to steal Chris's children. that Tom seduced Martha to gain access to her assets, that the whole case was a conspiracy of two lovers against an innocent entrepreneur. Martha read, feeling bile rise in her throat. She looked at Tom. This is the end. They destroyed your reputation. The court won't believe us. Tom shook his head, but there was tension in his eyes too. It's Chris's last desperate move, but we must be strong. Tomorrow is the trial. We will show the truth. But both knew, in the court of public opinion, they had already lost, and that could influence the judge. The next day, Monday morning, Tom and Martha drove to the Supreme Court in Manhattan. Hundreds of journalists waited outside the building. They shouted questions, pointed cameras. Tom shielded Martha, pushing through the crowd. Finally, they entered the courtroom. Chris sat on the other side, next to his lawyer, an expensive, famous shark, Robert Stone. Chris looked confident, calm. He smiled at Martha, a cold, mocking smile. The judge, the same Mr. William Stone who presided over the parental rights case, opened the trial. We are hearing the criminal case against Christopher Newman, Andrew Rogers, and Calvin Wright for document forgery, corruption, and embezzlement. Prosecution, please present evidence. Prosecutor Stone, no relation to the lawyer, stood up, presenting one by one. The recording of the conversation between Chris and Rogers, handwriting expert opinions, testimony of the nurse from the hospital, Miss Janice, bank documents. Everything formed a coherent picture of the crime. Then Tom called Professor Lewis to the stand. She testified calmly, professionally, explaining why Rogers's diagnosis was a forgery. No mentally healthy person develops schizophrenia in 3 weeks. It is medically impossible. But then came the defense's turn. Chris's lawyer, Stone, stood up with an icy smile. Your Honor, I would like to draw attention to a certain fact that appeared in the media, namely, the intimate relationship between the accuser, Ms. Martha Collins, and her lawyer, Mr. Thomas Winter. Does this not cast a shadow on the credibility of the entire case? The silence in the room was thick. The judge frowned. Counselor Stone, the private lives of the parties are irrelevant to the subject of the trial. Stone nodded. Of course, Your Honor, but I would like to ask Mr. Winter a question. Is it true that a romantic relationship connects you with Ms. Collins? Tom stood up, feeling anger boiling in him, but he answered calmly, Yes, it is true, but this relationship began after the conclusion of the parental rights proceedings, and it has no bearing on the facts of this case. Stone smiled broader. Ah, so it started after? And isn't it the case that you, a lonely widower, saved a young, attractive woman, taking her into your home, isolating her from the world, making her dependent on you? Is that not classic psychological manipulation? Martha stood up abruptly, screaming, That's a lie! Mr. Winter never manipulated me. He saved me. The judge banged the gavel. Order! Tom put a hand on Martha's shoulder, calming her. But he knew. Stone had just planted a seed of doubt. The trial lasted all day. More witnesses, experts, doctors testified. When finally the judge announced a recess for the verdict, it was late afternoon. Martha and Tom left the courtroom feeling exhausted. In the hallway, Chris approached them, standing opposite. He looked at Martha with a cold smile. Think you'll win? Think you'll take everything from me? Never. Even if I go to prison, I'll destroy you. You and your lover will live in the shadow of suspicion for the rest of your lives. Tom stood between them. Walk away, Chris. You've already lost. Chris laughed. We'll see. And he walked away. The verdict was to be announced in a week. 7 days that dragged like 7 months. Martha returned to the villa with Tom, feeling the weight of uncertainty on her shoulders. The triplets sensed the tension. Sophie cried more often. Jacob was restless. Michael didn't want to eat. Martha tried to maintain normality. She played with them in the garden, read stories, sang lullabies. But at night, when the children slept, she sat by the window in her room and looked into the darkness, praying, "God, if you ever heard me, hear me now. Let us win. Not for me, for my children." Tom worked day and night, preparing final arguments, checking every detail. He hired another expert, a professor of criminal law, who was to appear as a witness regarding procedural manipulation by Chris. He knew that one mistake, one oversight, could cost them everything. During that week, something unexpected happened. On Wednesday evening, when Martha was putting the children to sleep, the doorbell rang. Tom opened it and saw a young woman on the doorstep, maybe 25, slim, with long dark hair and frightened eyes. She spoke quickly, nervously. "My name is Agnes Walker. I was Christopher Newman's assistant for 2 years. I need to talk to you. I have something that might help in the case." Tom let her inside, leading her to the office. Martha, hearing voices, came downstairs. Agnes sat on the sofa, clutching her purse, clearly terrified. Tom sat opposite her. "Please tell us. What do you know?" Agnes took a deep breath. "I worked for Mr. Newman since 2022. I was his secretary, personal assistant. I saw how he treated his wife, how he yelled at her over the phone, how he called her that crazy woman, that burden. Once I heard his conversation with his mother, Miss Elizabeth. She told him, 'You must get rid of her. Take the kids and throw her on the street. She has no family. No one will defend her.' And he answered, 'I'm already planning it. Rogers will handle the documents.' I recorded this conversation on my phone. I did it for myself, in case he tried to frame me for something too." Tom sat up straight, feeling a rush of adrenaline. "Do you have that recording?" Agnes nodded, pulling out an old phone. "Here. But I'm afraid Mr. Newman has connections, money. If he finds out I testified against him..." Martha approached, kneeling beside her, taking her hand. "Ms. Agnes, please help. If you don't testify, he might win. And that means more women will suffer. More children will be taken from mothers. Please be brave." Agnes looked at Martha, fear and compassion fighting in her eyes. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, I'll testify. But please protect me." Tom nodded. "I promise I will ensure your protection. And if needed, a new identity, a new job. I'll do everything." That night, Tom listened to the recording. The voices were clear, Chris and his. Mother planning everything step by step. How to get rid of her, how to forge documents, how to buy the notary. It was the last, missing piece of the puzzle. Proof of premeditation, of a family conspiracy, of cold calculation. Tom called Prosecutor Stone at midnight. "I have a new witness, and a recording that changes everything. We must introduce this into the trial." Stone, woken from sleep, listened to the recording over the phone. When it ended, he said only, "Counselor Winter, you just won this case." The day of the verdict, Monday, July 8th, a sunny, hot summer morning. New York bustled with life, but for Martha, the world narrowed to one place. Courtroom 3 in the Supreme Court. She dressed in a simple white blouse and navy skirt. Tom advised her to look simple, like a real mother, not someone trying to play a role. She tied her hair in a simple bun. She wore no makeup. She didn't need to. Her face, gaunt, with shadows under her eyes, but with a clear, pure gaze, spoke more than any words. Tom led her through the crowd of journalists. This time they didn't shout questions. After the articles in the tabloids, the atmosphere had changed. Some media stood by Chris, some by Martha. There was a divide, but Tom knew. When the judge heard the last recording, all doubts would vanish. In the courtroom, Chris sat straight, dressed in an elegant grey suit. His face was a mask of calm, but Martha saw small signs of tension, a twitching muscle in his jaw, the way he clenched his hands. Next to him sat his mother, Elizabeth, cold, haughty, in a black suit with pearls. She looked at Martha with contempt, as if saying, "Think you'll win against the Newmans? You are nobody." Judge Stone entered. The room stood. When they sat, the judge looked at both sides. "Before announcing the verdict, I would like to hear final motions. Prosecutor Stone, do you have anything to add?" Prosecutor Stone stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I would like to present new evidence that arrived at the last minute. A witness, Miss Agnes Walker, former assistant of the defendant Christopher Newman, and a recording of a conversation between the defendant and his mother, Elizabeth Newman, in which they planned to deprive Martha Collins of freedom, children, and property." Chris's lawyer, Stone, Robert, jumped up. "Objection! This evidence was not presented in the proper time frame. This is a procedural violation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. If the evidence is relevant to the case, it will be included. Please call the witness." Agnes entered the room, pale, shaking, but determined. She took the oath and sat in the witness stand. The prosecutor asked her questions, and she answered quietly but clearly, describing what she saw, what she heard in Chris's office. Then, Stone played the recording. The room listened in absolute silence. Chris's voice, smooth, confident. "I have to get rid of her once and for all, Mom. She's starting to suspect something." Elizabeth's voice, cold as ice. "Son, I told you from the beginning, that girl is a gold digger. She took you for money. Now use her weakness. She is lonely, without family. Make her crazy. Rogers will help, and the children will stay with us, with real family. Chris, I already have a plan. I'll give her drugs that cloud her mind, then Rogers will issue an opinion. The court will believe me. I am a respected entrepreneur. She is nobody." Laughter, cold, ruthless. When the recording ended, the silence in the room was so thick you could hear a pin drop. Judge Stone looked at Chris with an expression mixed with disgust and disbelief. Chris sat rigidly, his face white, but still trying to maintain the facade. That is a forgery. Edited. My voice was used out of context." The judge interrupted him coolly. "A forensic audio analysis will confirm or refute the authenticity of the recording. But judging by your reaction, Mr. Newman, I fear it is authentic." He looked at Elizabeth. "Miss Elizabeth. Newman, do you wish to say anything in your defense?" Elizabeth stood up, her voice hard, full of contempt. "I don't have to explain myself to anyone. I protected my family. That woman," she pointed at Martha, "is an adventuress who seduced my son, stole our fortune, and now tries to destroy us. If I defended my child, where is the crime in that?" The judge looked at her for a long time, and then said words that went down in the history of this case. "Miss Newman, protecting family does not cover breaking the law, forging documents, embezzling someone else's property, and destroying the life of an innocent woman. What you call protection, the law calls organized crime. Please sit down." Elizabeth sat, losing her composure for the first time in her life. Her cold mask cracked. She saw she had lost. The judge took a deep breath. The court, having heard all evidence, testimonies, and circumstances of the case, has reached the following conclusions. The defendant, Christopher Newman, in conspiracy with his mother, Elizabeth Newman, Dr. Andrew Rogers, and notary Calvin Wright, committed multiple crimes to the detriment of his wife, Martha Collins. These crimes include forgery of medical and notarial documents, corruption, asset embezzlement, unlawful deprivation of parental rights, holding children against the law, and attempting multiple times to place the victim in a psychiatric institution against her will and without medical grounds. All these actions were taken to seize the victim's assets and isolate her from her own children. The judge looked at Chris. Defendant Christopher Newman is sentenced to 8 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Additionally, he is obligated to pay damages to Martha Collins in the amount of $12 million, the equivalent of the unlawfully sold land, and an additional $5 million as compensation for moral damages. The court orders immediate seizure of the defendant's assets until the compensation is paid. Chris jumped up from his seat shouting, "That's unfair! You can't treat me like this! I have rights!" 2 officers approached, grabbing him by the arms. The judge continued calmly. Elizabeth Newman is sentenced to 3 years in prison, suspended, and a fine of $1 million. Additionally, she is stripped of the right to contact the grandchildren, the Collins triplets, for a period of 10 years. Elizabeth sat like carved from stone, her face white as chalk. For the first time in her life, she was publicly humiliated. The judge looked at Dr. Rogers. Andrew Rogers is sentenced to 5 years in prison and permanently loses the right to practice medicine. His actions were particularly perfidious. As a doctor, he abused the trust society places in the medical profession. Rogers huddled on the defendant's bench, sobbing quietly. Finally, the judge looked at Martha. "Miss Martha Collins, in the name of the United States, I offer you an apology for the failure of the system that should have protected you, but instead became a tool of your persecution. Let this verdict be the beginning of your new life, a life in dignity, with your children, with regained justice." He banged the gavel. "The verdict is final." Martha sat motionless, unable to believe it. 8 years. Chris got 8 years, plus 17 million in damages, plus the loss of everything. Her property returns. Her children are safe. It's over. Really over. She felt Tom hugging her, pulling her close. He whispered in her ear, "You won. You won everything." Martha turned, burying her face in his shoulder, crying. This time the tears were a mix of relief, joy, gratitude, and exhaustion. She cried for all the months of pain, for every night under the bridge, for every moment she thought she wouldn't survive. Now, everything made sense. Every tear, every prayer, every fight, everything led to this moment. When they left the room, journalists rushed at them. But this time, the questions were different. "Miss Collins, what do you feel now? Will you forgive your husband? What do you plan to do with the recovered assets?" Tom shielded her from the cameras, speaking briefly. "My client will not be giving interviews. We ask that you respect her privacy." But Martha stopped him, putting a hand on his arm. She turned to the cameras, looking straight into the lenses. Her voice was quiet, but strong. "I want all women going through something similar to know you are not alone. There is justice. There is hope. Fight. Never give up." And she walked away, holding Tom's hand. A week after the verdict, Martha's life picked up a new pace. Chris was incarcerated in a correctional facility in upstate New York. Martha didn't go to visit him. She never wanted to see his face again. Elizabeth Newman, humiliated and financially ruined, she had to pay $1 million fine, left New York. Rumor had it she moved to her sister in Chicago. Dr. Rogers began serving his sentence in a white-collar prison. Notary right, although ultimately not sentenced, he recanted testimony, lost his license and disappeared from public life. Martha began recovering her life. The land in Vermont, which was the key to the whole tragedy, returned to her hands. The developer, BuildCorp, had to return the money to Chris, and that money, along with Chris's wealth, was seized by the bailiff and transferred to Martha as compensation. She was now officially a millionaire. She had about $18 million in her account. But money wasn't the most important thing. The most important were the children. The triplets, now a year and a half old, grew quickly. Jacob was a quiet, calm boy. He loved books, listened to stories for hours. Michael was the opposite, lively, loud, constantly exploring something, taking toys apart, running around the garden. Sophie was delicate, sensitive, loved music. When Martha played the violin, the girl sat at her feet, listening with closed eyes, swaying to the rhythm of the melody. Martha spent every moment with them. In the morning, she woke up with the first cry. Usually Michael, who was an early bird, fed them breakfast, played in the garden. In the afternoons, she read them stories, taught first words, sang lullabies. Evenings, when they fell asleep, she sat by their cribs, looking at their little faces, thinking, I will never lose you, never again. And Tom became not only her lawyer, not only her savior, he became her family. Every evening, he returned from work, threw his briefcase on the sofa, and played with the triplets, building block towers with Jacob, chasing Michael around the garden, dancing with Sophie, holding her in his arms. The children loved him immediately. They called him Uncle Tom, and Sophie sometimes slipped and said, Daddy. Every time it happened, Tom felt something squeeze his heart, a mix of pain, reminding him of his lost daughter, and joy, because these children gave him a second chance at being a father. Martha and Tom no longer hid their relationship. The media first tried to make a sensation of it. Lawyer and client, love or calculation. But when people saw them together, when they saw how Tom looked at Martha like a miracle he didn't deserve, and how Martha looked at Tom like the only solid rock in a sea of chaos, they understood it was true love, pure, deep, built on mutual rescue. One August evening, as the sun set over the villa, painting the sky shades of pink and gold, Tom asked Martha for a talk. The children were asleep. It was just past 8. They went to the garden, sitting on a bench under an old oak tree. Tom took her hand, looking into her eyes. His face was serious, but warmth danced in his eyes. Martha, I want to ask you something. Martha felt her heart speed up. She knew what was coming, but still, when Tom knelt before her, pulling out a small velvet box, tears welled in her eyes. Tom opened the box. Inside shone a simple, elegant sapphire ring. Not a diamond. He knew Martha hated ostentation. He said, voice trembling with emotion, Martha Collins, I love you more than I could express in words. You saved me from the darkness I lived in for 5 years. You gave me a reason to get up in the morning, to fight, to believe life can be beautiful. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to be a father to your children, not biological, but real, in every sense of the word. I want to wake up next to you, grow old with you, survive all ups and downs with you. Martha, will you marry me? Martha cried, unable to utter a word. She nodded violently, sobbing, Yes, yes I will, 1,000 times yes. Tom put the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Then he stood up, hugging her, kissing her, feeling her tears mix with his own. They stood like that for a long time, in the garden drowning in twilight, knowing this was the beginning of something beautiful, something that would survive everything. They got married 3 months. Later, in November, in a small church in Vermont, the same one where Martha was baptized as a child. It was a simple, intimate wedding. No pomp, no press, just the closest ones. On Martha's side were a few friends from the conservatory who apologized for their silence in hard times and now wanted to repair relationships. Mrs. Higgins, the neighbor who helped her with $100, Nurse Janice, who testified in the trial, and Detective K, with his wife. On Tom's side were his colleagues. From the firm, Professor Lewis, Prosecutor Stone, and a few old friends. But the most important were the children. The triplets, now 2 years old, walked as the wedding party. Sophie, in a white dress, carried a basket of rose petals. Jacob and Michael, in little suits, held the ring pillow. Technically the nanny carried it, but the boys pretended it was their merit. When Martha entered the church in a simple cream gown, holding a violin, instead of a bouquet, she played the wedding march herself. Tom stood at the altar, crying without shame. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The vows were simple, traditional, but when Martha said, "I vow to you love, fidelity, and marital honesty, and that I will not leave you until death," she knew every word was truth forged in the fire of suffering. When Tom repeated the same words, his voice broke, but it was sure. The priest, an old pastor who remembered Martha as a child, smiled. "What God has joined, let no man put asunder. You may kiss the bride." And they kissed, in a small church in Vermont, in the glow of candles, while the triplets clapped and the guests cried with happiness. The reception was in the village community hall, 100 yards from the church. There was no catering from New York, expensive alcohol, orchestra. There was music from a local band, dishes prepared by village ladies, a simple cake. But there was joy. Real, unadulterated joy. Tom and Martha danced the first dance, to a piece Martha composed, specially for this day, titled New Beginning. The band played it, and they moved slowly, embraced, paying no attention to anyone around. At one moment, Tom whispered in her ear, "Thank you for agreeing to save me." Martha looked at him, smiling through tears. "It was you who saved me." Tom shook his head. "No, I only found you. You saved yourself, with your strength, faith, determination. I was just lucky to be there." Then came the line of guests. Everyone wanted to congratulate, wish luck. Mrs. Higgins cried, hugging Martha, "I knew, honey, that God wouldn't abandon you. I knew." Professor Lewis, usually cool and professional, also dropped her mask, shaking Tom's hand. "Mr. Winter, you found a woman worth sacrificing everything for. Take care of her." Detective K, usually cynical and tough, also softened. "Martha, Tom, this was the best case I handled in my career, because for the first time, I feel I really helped someone." When the reception ended, it was late, midnight. The guests dispersed. Tom and Martha took the sleeping triplets. The nanny helped pack them into the car and returned to the villa in Greenwich. For the first time as a married couple. At home, when the children were already lying in their cribs, Tom and Martha stood in the doorway of the bedroom, the one they now officially shared. Tom picked Martha up, traditionally, and carried her over the threshold, both laughing quietly. He laid her on the bed, sitting next to her. She looked at him in the moonlight falling through the window. She said quietly, "Mr. Winter." "No, not Mr. anymore. Tom, husband. I never thought I would be happy again. I thought my life ended that night under the bridge. But you gave me a second life. And I promise I will use it to love you, to raise our children, to be the best version of myself." Tom kissed her forehead, cheeks, lips. "And I promise I will protect you, support you, love you every day, until my last breath." And that night, in the silence of the old villa, began their new life. Shared, happy, built on foundations of pain, transformed into strength. Years passed. Martha founded the Hope for Mothers Foundation, an organization helping women who lost parental rights or were victims of domestic violence. From her $18 million in damages, she dedicated $5 to the foundation. She hired lawyers, psychologists, therapists. The foundation helped over 100 women annually, some to regain children, others to escape abusive partners, still others simply to gain psychological and financial support to start over. Martha also returned to music, not to the Philharmonic. She didn't want to go back there. The place was tainted with memories. Instead, she began teaching music at home, giving private lessons to neighborhood children. Her music room in the villa became a place full of laughter, joy, and sounds of violin, piano, guitar. The triplets also began to learn. Sophie, of course, chose violin, like Mom, Jacob piano, and Michael drums, which was loud, but the parents endured. Tom limited his work at the firm. He resigned from big corporate contracts, focusing on pro bono cases, similar to Martha's. Over 5 years, he helped over 30 women and children regain justice. His firm became a symbol, a place where the aggrieved knew they would find help. But the most important was family life. Every morning, Tom woke up seeing Martha next to him and thanked God. For that night, he stopped at the red light by the quay bridge. Every evening, Martha put the triplets to sleep, kissing their heads, whispering, "I love you. Mama will always be with you." And these words were not empty. They were a promise forged in pain. The triplets grew. Over time, Tom officially adopted them, became their legal father, though in his heart, he was one from the beginning. The children called him Dad, not Uncle. And when they were 8, the youngest, Sophie, asked once, "Dad, are you our real father?" Tom hugged her, answering, "I am not the father who made you, but I am the father who chose you, and that means more." 8 years passed. Christopher Newman was released from prison. He served his full sentence, no reduction. He left the correctional facility in upstate New York on a chilly October morning, a broken man. He was 53, but looked 60. Prison changed him, not physically, though he lost weight, turned grey, but mentally. For 8 years he had time to think, to reflect, to understand what he lost. He had nothing, no assets. Everything was seized for Martha's compensation. No friends. Everyone turned away when the truth came out. No family. His mother, Elizabeth, died 3 years earlier of a heart attack. He was convinced she died of shame. He didn't even have a place to return to. He rented a small apartment in Queens, 2 rooms in an old tenement, for the only money he had left, $2,000 from an account that wasn't seized. He got a job as a warehouse worker, earning minimum wage, packing boxes 8 hours a day. The man who was once master of life now counted every dime. But the worst was loneliness and guilt. Guilt that gnawed at him every night as he lay in bed in darkness. He saw Martha's face, how she cried that day in the hospital when she woke up without children. He saw the triplets, how they reached out to him when he was still with them, before everything fell apart. They were 10 now. They didn't know him. They didn't need him. They had a father, Tom. One day, a year after leaving prison, Chris did something he never thought he would do. He drove to Greenwich. He stood in front of Tom's villa, beautiful, surrounded by a garden, full of life. He saw the children through the window, 3 pre-teens, laughing, chasing each other in the garden. He saw Martha, playing the violin on the terrace, radiant, happy. He saw Tom, coming out of the house, hugging Martha from behind, kissing her neck. Chris stood behind the fence, looking at the life he could have, had, which he destroyed with his own greed, manipulation, cruelty. Tears flowed down his face. The first time since childhood he cried, but there was no one to apologize to. There was no chance for redemption. There was only emptiness. He walked away quietly, unnoticed. He never returned there. Epilogue. 15 years after that night under the bridge, Martha Winter, now bearing her husband's name, was 43. She sat on the terrace of the villa, watching the sunset over the garden. Next to her sat Tom, now 67, grey, but still strong, still alert. They held hands, silent, enjoying the peace. Music could be heard from the house. The triplets, now 17, were preparing for a concert. Sophie, the oldest, by 3 minutes over Jacob, studied at the conservatory, the same one where Martha once studied. She played the violin phenomenally, had already won several national competitions. They spoke of her as a new talent of classical music. Jacob was a calm, intelligent boy, interested in law, like his father, and planned to study at Columbia University. Michael, always lively, became an athlete, played on the youth basketball team, and dreamed of a professional career. All three knew their history. Martha and Tom never hid the truth. They knew their biological father was a monster who hurt their mother. They knew Tom wasn't their biological father, but it didn't matter. Tom was their dad, the one who taught them to ride a bike, who went to parent-teacher conferences, who helped with homework, who hugged them when things were tough. He was family. One day Sophie asked Martha, "Mom, do you hate him? That Christopher?" Martha thought for a long time, then answered, "No, sweetie. Hate is a poison that destroys you from the inside. I forgave him, not for him, but for myself, to be able to live peacefully. But that doesn't mean I'll forget. I will never forget what he taught me, that evil exists, that you have to fight, that justice exists, but requires work." Sophie nodded, understanding. Now, sitting on the terrace, Martha thought about everything she had been through, about the night under the bridge when she prayed for death, about Tom, who stopped at the right place at the right time, about the trials, tears, fear, about the victory, about the new life. Tom squeezed her hand. "What are you thinking about?" Martha smiled. "That God really listens, that night when I was in the darkest place, he sent me you, my angel." Tom kissed her hand. "I am not an angel. I am just a man who was lucky to meet you." At that moment, the triplets ran out of the house, Sophie with her violin, Jacob with a book, Michael with a ball. They shouted, "Mom! Dad! Come on! Sophie is going to record a new piece for YouTube." Martha and Tom got up, following the children into the house. And at that moment, Martha thought, this is happiness. Not the absence of problems, not perfection, but love, family, peace. This is the happiness she fought for, and which she won. That night, when everyone was asleep, Martha got up quietly so as not to wake Tom. She went to her music room, took the violin. She played softly so as not to wake the family. The piece she played was called "A Prayer That Was Answered," the same one she composed that night under the bridge when she thought she was dying. But now the melody wasn't sad. It was triumphant. It was a song of thanksgiving. It was an anthem of survival. When she finished, she put down the violin and walked to the window. She looked at the stars over Greenwich, whispering quietly, "Thank you for every day, for every breath, for a second chance." And the stars, silent and eternal, shone calmly, as if saying, "You deserved it, Martha. You deserved happiness." And in a prison cell, because yes, Chris went back to prison a year after release, caught attempting financial fraud, another 3 years. The former entrepreneur lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the life he wasted, about the children he never knew, about the woman he destroyed, but who now lived fully happy, a happiness he would never know. And for the first time in his life, Christopher Newman understood the truth his mother never told him. Evil does not win. It might win a battle, 2, 10, but truth, good, justice, always win the war, always.